You are, Jesse.
Okay, we're all set. Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here. First off, of course, a big thank you to James and to all the very good people behind Grolier for hosting us and for inviting me to introduce Joshua Bennett this evening. We are gathered here to celebrate a new book of poetry entering the world. And you'll pardon, come on in, and you'll pardon my emotion as a fellow writer for saying it in such personal and passionate terms. But I think, and I know many of you feel this way, I feel that every book publication is in its own way a birth. A creation made out of human love and hope, and a gift that by the very fact of arriving in the world forevermore keeps on giving. I know many of you already know Joshua, and that in this good company, in many ways, he needs no introduction. But I do want to say a few words so that we may take the measure of not just who he is, but what he has done. And so that he hears, and we, and that'll be a key word here, and that we hear what he already means to us. Now, I've been knowing Josh for a long time. We just said it's been 15 years, I think, exactly. 15 years ago, we both arrived at Princeton as graduate students in the English program in the fall of 2011, which does seem like eons ago now. At the time, I was an erstwhile bookseller with some slightly confused literary ambitions. Not entirely sure what I was doing or how I would survive as a graduate student. Joshua arrived already fully formed, beautifully confident, brilliant, a poet who was already making waves around the country, and I mean that literally, traveling back and forth, electrifying campuses from coast to coast with his poems, performing at the White House. Yes, it was a different era. As always, with everything he does, though, he was always thinking about a wider we. From the beginning, he was finding ways to support fellow artists and poets, inventing entire new platforms and collectives like Strivers Row, doing things that, frankly, I don't think the rest of us had ever really imagined could be done. Or if we did, we never got around to actually doing. This latest collection, with the gorgeous title We, that Gwendolyn Brooks, leaning on the community, calls the loveliest word of all, as Josh recalls in a perfect epigraph to it. This is Josh's, by my count, fourth book of poetry, and it comes to us exactly 1 decade after his first book of poetry, The Sobbing School, appeared in 2016. And I remember very vividly how proud and excited I was to just sort of be a part of the moment of the publication of that book. And when I think about it now, and I think back to that year, which all of us, I think, know and understand now to have been a kind of historic and pivotal inflection point, I become all the more convinced of the importance and significance of that collection that has strengthened with time, and I predict confidently that we will look back from the future and see it as one of the classics in the tradition, in the way that we now think about titles like A Street in Bronzeville. More books followed. The dazzling and deliciously punning title Ode from 2020. The Unclassifiable and the Path-Breaking, The Study of Human Life from 2022, which was the occasion for our last event right here at the Grolier that we did together to celebrate it. A book launch tradition I hope will continue long into the future. And we're here today to celebrate Josh the poet, but I can't forego saying a few words too about his other books, which show the many ways that he contributes so uniquely to the literary and intellectual landscape of the present. As many of you know, he is also a professor, scholar, and academic. By title, Professor of Literature and Distinguished Chair of the Humanities at MIT. His monograph, Being Property Once Myself, Blackness and the End of Man, published by Harvard University Press in 2020, has shaped and continues to orient the contemporary field of Black studies. He's also the author of Spoken Word, a cultural history published in 2023. To my knowledge, the first and certainly the best account of what has arguably been the most popular and transformative cultural and poetics movements in recent American history. And finally, earlier this very year, he published The People Can Fly, American Promise, Black Prodigies, and the Greatest Miracle of All Time, a book whose title pays homage to Virginia Hamilton's The People Could Fly, a children's book we both grew up with, and I think many of you may know or remember as well. And a book that I think showcases beautifully an intersection of the many great concerns that we also find coursing through his poetry. A delicate attention to the delicate but deeply formative role that family, church, and school play in the lives of young people, their self-understanding, the texture of their world, the perils they face, the meaning, the true meaning, I would say, of the word education, as in formation, and the philosophy behind how we think about what education means and how we treat, but also often how we mistreat, the idea of giftedness in our society. His concern with the arts, with poetry, of course, but also with all of the others, music, dance, new media, and the too often, at times, neglected art of oratory, that love of the verb that from the barbershop to the preacher's pulpit has always vibrated at the center of Black life. It is a great honor for me to be here with him and with you this evening. And I want to end these introductory remarks by just briefly invoking another poetic tradition that's on my mind, because I've been teaching Dante's Inferno this past week. There's a great tradition of the poets in Dante's circle writing to each other. And when they wrote to each other, of course, they wrote in sonnets. And one of the people in this circle was a poet by the name of Cino da Pistoia. Cino was a bit older than Dante. He was kind of mentor to him. And they would complain to each other about things. They had a lot to complain about. Things were not so great, right? Wars ravaging the country, crappy politicians, corruption. And of course, they were also both exiles. Issues that we may be able to identify with ourselves. And there's a sonnet that Cino writes to Dante, where he has a lovely line, a couple of lines in the last tercets. And he says to him, "Diletto fratel mio, di pene involto, di dir non star, se di fe non sei sciolto." My beloved brother, besieged by struggles, don't give up on your work if you haven't lost faith. In other words, brother mine, your work is important. No matter what griefs, what dangers are falling upon you, remember that there are people out here who need your words. There is a we that needs you, that calls forth your poetry, calls it forth into being, and that we hope that we can help you keep the faith, and we give thanks for the work that you have done and the work that you have yet to do. With that, I give you Joshua Bennett.
All right. One more round of applause for Jesse. Gorgeous introduction. How are y'all doing? Oh, wow. It's packed in here.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Everybody here.
Thank y'all so much for coming out to celebrate this fourth collection and book number 7, which, as my mother and grandmother would say, is the number of completion. I was raised in the Black church, and you know what? I think I'll actually start with the first poem in the book, which brings up the Black church, but also my wife, Pamela, who's home tonight and inspired this poem. She's the best. Jesse I think this is right. I'm on camera. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Jesse is, my favorite one of my friends rather. And you're her friend too, I think. She would say. And she says he always shows up for you. She has a tradition where she throws me a surprise party every year for my birthday since we met. And one of the years she threw a surprise pool party for me. And Jesse just came through. I was, dude, what are you doing at my house? He's like, oh, it's a surprise. And then we just hang out and talked about this book he'd been writing. And for me, for my wife, for my children, for my family, Jesse's always been there. And he always comes through. So thank you, brother. For this love that has kept us going, this bond. It's the first black man I saw in the room when I got to Princeton. I was like, right, we want to stay close for 15 years. So this is First Philosophy. What is your all-time favorite phenomenon? Mine is when the error is as lovely as the aim. The other day, my wife texts me, love thy baby, like a contemporary commandment. Later, she explains that she meant to write, love that baby, in response to a mint condition song I sent that morning, but I can't let the first phrase go. It reminds me of those older saints on Sunday saying, look at God, whenever they were interrupted by transcendent beauty. I tried and did not see him, nor dared to ask where I might search, but I cherished the lesson, took personally that charge to study the invisible, call forward its power through chant or speech, a distinct vocal pattern or arrangement of keys, and the spirit would cast its fathomless cloak over us, make us glow. At home, we worshipped precision, children honed by hot combs and ironing boards, perfect grades, our family name a banner we carried in our war against the outside world. How did I get here? This soft blue house in Massachusetts, my hand against the Japanese maple outside to better hear its wisdom, son singing ballads in his toddler Esperanto downstairs as I try to compose the story of our arrival, getting the details wrong, no doubt, though that melody is unmistakable, clear, from all those dreams, dueling in the air. Thank you. All right. I'll read two more from the first section that are about fatherhood and also friendship. So they're both called We. And this first We was actually inspired by Major Jackson and this book he wrote called Hoops that really stuck with me when I was at Princeton. I don't have an MFA. I'm a self-taught poet. And so part of how I fell in love with the art of crafting poetry for the page is I would walk through the stacks at Firestone Library. As Jesse will also tell you, the ethos of being in our graduate program at Princeton was basically, if you want to be a genius, stay in the library for 12 hours a day and don't talk to anybody. We didn't quite stick to that regimen. We read a lot, but we talked to each other at least because sociality is the point. I teach at MIT now, and what I tell my students quite often about literature, one is that it's a technology of memory, which they dig a little bit, but also that it's an excuse for us to get together, and that our species has been doing this for thousands of years because there's something very important about getting together and making it a ritual. So this is about the rituals I grew up with in the Bronx and in South Yonkers. This is We. We grew up listening to the gossip of elders in crowded salons, the Holy Spirit, Hot 97, our guts drum majors signaling whether to run left or right when a bullet's ricochet cracked the nighttime air, jokes about our hair, mama's weight, our place in the great graph of human potential. We slap-boxed until it turned to scrapping unexpectedly, scuffles blossoming from schoolyard play we claimed was meant to enhance precision, little else. We had no good words for wealth, no trust in arbitrary rules, or sense of power beyond the kinds that shaped our lives inside discernible bounds. The belt, the badge, shoe boxes underneath the bed which held abuela's savings, first poems, the heels our mothers wore to shuffle the shine off the floor of a disco spot downtown where working people went to let the stress of day, last shift's weight, evaporate. We knew the cool ambrosia of hydrant water, how without it we might not have survived the height of July's brutality. We learned Spanish to talk to girlfriends' mothers via landline, ask permission to speak for a half hour after school para discutir la tarea or some other benevolent, though transparently false claim. We dreamt of flight and heavyweight fights and playing our latest hits on late night TV, crossing up small forwards on the NBA on NBC with our uncles watching. Their voices so loud the neighbors assumed someone must have lost a bet. We imagined a world without debt, or early death, or stress so heavy the mind must be lifted elsewhere to bear it and yet persist. We were latchkey kids, troubadours, substitute parents at 14, teaching little brothers to read and long divide, and ride the bus home alone in time to reach the front door just before dark, when the world put on another face, so we did too. And with masks and wigs we got from grandma, devised productions to fill the day's remainder, command the language we inherited to live anew, or else fail magnificently at trying to say what we held most dear, but could not yet sketch unto the palimpsest of the world as we knew it. Thank you so much. That part about the wigs is real. That's part of how I learned to read, is that my sister and I would take these wigs from my grandmother's salon. She owned and operated 3 beauty salons in Harlem. After she came up north with my grandfather, when they were in their late teens, they met in a strawberry field in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I try to mention this at least once every time I give a reading. Hey, good. Part of my formation was the fact that every time I would hear that story, it was in large part about the beauty of that field, and about how what many would consider in unthinkable conditions, they found not only love, but a real sense of not just what it meant to have hope, but to be a hope, as Cornel West would say. And they carried that example into every space. So in my grandmother's salon, if I could spell a word longer than 3 syllables, all the older Black women would give me $1. I was 6 years old talking about malfeasance. My aspirations to be loquacious. Okay. So this is we. And yeah, it's about what metaphor aspires toward, and doesn't always reach. We. The money of the mind is attention, maybe, which is not initially where I thought I'd begin, but we're already here now, using the language of care and economy, though God talk was truly my first way in. Sustained attention is how we approach a flesh and blood experience of the divine, I say to the therapist nodding her head. Only moments after we disagree over whether her dress is coral or yellow-based red, as opposed, of course, to a blue-based red, like the square on her tartan scarf. My jacket is the color of snow on television. My eyes are as brown as my father's. When he lifted a stranger off the ground, he saw through the driver's side window, beating a woman on Broadway. I am almost the age now he was then, and I'm still studying the difference between what a man proclaims in speech and what he says with his body. Tomorrow marks another year on earth for his 3rd son, and he is a father now, with a boy he is trying to teach the benefits of apprehension, who instead prefers to walk on his hands, leap from the playground slide, climb on countertops to watch TV from another room entirely. Where does my influence, my aspiration end, and the child begin, who refashions the cosmos with his laughter? All right. So next we'll, where should we go? Yeah. All right, let's go to Alabama. Because Sunrise in here, and Mae Jemison too. Does everyone here know who Mae Jemison is? First Black woman to reach outer space. Child prodigy, went to Stanford at 16. One of my favorite stories about her, she talks about coming home from Stanford her freshman summer and having had trouble with the math classes at Stanford. And her mother saying, well, why don't you ask your father for help? He's good with numbers. And she said, my dad didn't even go to college. How could he help me? And she sat in a room for a bit and she thought, maybe my dad has something to say about this. And he was able to help her kind of crack through the problem set. And she said that moment she learned a great deal, not only about herself, but about her father. And there's this really beautiful interview with Nikki Giovanni where they talk about men from Alabama being good with numbers. And I think about that a lot. Like, my dad was always somebody who would kind of weigh the cost of moral courage. And for some reason, the scale was always imbalanced. He would just do whatever he thought was bravest at all times, So if it's defending an older person who's getting in a fight on the train, or the day we got locked out of the house and he climbed the side of our home, broke in through the bathroom window to unlock the door so we could get in and I could eat at 3 p.m. And I was like, Dad, why are you doing these Tom Cruise Mission Impossible things to get in the house? And he's like, you got to take care of you guys, He's also a Marine, so I think he just had that training he could tap into. But this is a poem about him, and he grew up, he integrated his high school in Alabama. So this is in part about that experience. but also all the incredible Black historical figures from Alabama, like besides Mae Jemison, like Sonia Sanchez and Joe Lewis, John Lewis. You hear some of their names. But we begin with Sun Ra, who's a hero of mine for reasons you'll hear about later. So this is Decatur, Alabama. Oh, one more thing. My dad loves Star Trek. That's important for this poem. Decatur, Alabama. 1. Naturally, we begin with Sun Ra's escape pod arcing through seamless indigo, fleeing Saturn for Earth, a Birmingham crash landing in 1914, 34 years before my father enters atmosphere. 5 in advance of the day Klansmen slash the tires of Pop's bright orange Firebird parked just off campus, forever marking senior year with an air of utopian striving, the open road a metonym for life's million hidden prizes, cut just short. 20 siblings, 2 sets of 10, packed into 4 cars for shopping trips. A quarter of them with eyes as green as grandpa's or God's. Alabama. The roll call of your children reads like the first ballot of Blackness's Hall of Fame. King, Sanchez, Page, Walker, Mays, Joe Lewis and John Lewis, Jesse Owens racing the twilight home, Zora Neale Hurston summoning songs from the mouths of mules and saints to hold up the sky. 2. For Mae Jemison. It was perhaps our oldest ritual. My father and I watching Star Trek on the living room floor, quiet as calculation, my small frame beside his own, like an image and its draft. We studied any and all variations of the show we adored like no other. Voyager, Deep Space Nine, The Next Generation, comparing each iteration to its ancestor only once it had run its course. I saw myself everywhere. Data, Worf, Geordie LaForge, scientists and warriors, adventurers in any form you could imagine, all comportments welcome, central to the mission of the Starship Enterprise, my boyhood eyes aglow as I dreamt of gliding through the incandescent blackness of the great beyond, smooth as a scimitar, even in hyperdrive, me and my intrepid crew, cruising at light speed toward the promise of another life. Pop never explained the tradition, but the call to see that story unfolding was its own inheritance, a journey through outer galaxies as it was through his own mind, the stillness in that room no issue for me, who knew even then that quiet had its own texture and richness, that my father had always been this way, a man who spoke with deeds, a look in his eyes that could level a room or else lift it into orbit. Over the years, he would teach me many names: Benjamin Banneker, Louis H. Latimer, Mary McLeod Bethune, narrators of our heroic human drama, George Washington Carver, Arthur Schomburg, Mae Jemison, who I would later learn was born in Alabama just like Pop and loved Star Trek too, and was the first Black woman to reach outer space and the first real astronaut to ever go on the show, The Next Generation to be exact, at the invitation of LeVar Burton, who was already a hero in our household, based on the transcendent power of reading Rainbow alone. But this was another level. This woman who had held an audience with the moon, seen the other side of the atmosphere that held us here. This dreamer of a human civilization on Mars, this teacher, this healer, this author of children's books and once distant goals made material for generations of us told we would inherit nothing and learn to love that absence. Instead, Dr. Jemison said, the very cosmos could belong to us. The darkness of our skin, our hair, our eyes was shared with that shimmering infinitude, that endless breath, the possibility that we too might one day take flight, achieve the weightlessness we had only felt in dreams, or heard when we heard Whitney Houston sing, or saw on TV in briefest flashes of stars millions of miles beyond our own, but more palpable now, so close you could almost grasp them, almost hold them there in your palm like a promise. All right, here's a poem about the Beach Boys, who were part of my ensemble for many reasons. One of them being that Brian Wilson's a genius, and he took the struggle in his mind and created this gorgeous collage that we could all live through and with. And yeah, Surf's Up has gone platinum, you know, in my house. Surfing USA too, but and their cover of Stevie Wonder's I Was Made to Love Her. I love a good Stevie Wonder cover. in both directions. His cover of Papa Was a Rolling Stone is incredible too. There'll be homework at the end. I'll just draw a bunch of stuff for y'all to listen to in the house. All right, so this is Hawthorne, California for the Beach Boys. What did I know of never-ending summer and surf rock riffs to open the day? The sheer brightness of Carl Wilson's falsetto running counter to the music's melancholy or revelations. I may not always love you. The family band from Hawthorne, California, casting a line from the mid-1960s into my living room, Tuesday afternoon at the turn of the century via VH1, a rerun of 100 best albums of all time, showing in the 3 p.m. slot. And now Pet Sounds is blaring through the corridors of our home somehow, as my big sister recounts the school day's adventures on the house phone upstairs, our mother already on her way back from the city to check math homework and ensure we are both still alive. But I am essentially immovable at this point, newly initiated into a sound I do not understand until I am old enough to be nostalgic for windswept locales and singular moments in time I have never lived through. Though I know them, I can assure you, in a place 1,000 parsecs beyond the limits of my present form. All right. We got any Ann Spencer fans in here? Any fans of the library in general? Okay. I love librarians. I love writing about librarians. Ann Spencer was a librarian in Lynchburg, Virginia. And her husband was an architect named Edward Spencer. And he built her this enclosed garden, about half an acre. And you might just think, oh, that's kind of a cool flourish. That's a nice birthday gift for your wife, you know? But there was also this other element to what I call in this book I'm working on, this art of opacity, right? Which is that they had Black radicals at their house all the time, right? So Paul Robeson's over there. W.B. Du Bois is over there. Zora Neale Hurston is over there. James Weldon Johnson is over there, who, thinking about this cover, Romare Bearden, We the People of the United States. I didn't learn the Star Spangled Banner until I was like 6 years old. And that's because I went to a preschool that was founded by James Weldon Johnson's niece, Mildred Johnson. And James Weldon Johnson, as many of you may know, wrote the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black national anthem. So that was the only national anthem I knew until I got, to public school in Yonkers. And when I heard Star Spangled Banner, I thought, oh, this is nice, but it doesn't really slap. Like, it's just different kind of energy. And it was, hundreds of us kind of singing this thing. And, our parents were surgeons and USPS workers and janitors and lawyers. And, we looked every kind of way. We're from the entire diaspora, performed plays in French. I mean, it was like an incredible space to grow up in, the modern school. And I think a lot about my teachers from that space and what they thought was available to us in the future, And Ann Spencer, it seems to me, was a librarian and teacher just like that, who really believed that any range of futures were available to her students. So this is a poem for her called Lynchburg, Virginia. I haven't said anything about Virgil yet, for shame. Okay, so 15 of these poems are inspired directly by Virgil's Georgics, which I first read when Jesse and I were at Princeton. The phenomenal poet and mentor Susan Stewart introduced me to Virgil in her class on pastoral poetry. She had a strict no technology rule in 2012. So no laptops, no phones. It was just us and Frost for 3 hours. And when the class ended, we went back. Oh, she's comfortable with me sharing the story. Hi, Susan, if you're out there. But we went back to her home. And she had alpacas there. And she just let us pet her alpacas and hang out and eat this kind of beautiful dinner. And that class really changed my life in no small part because, again, I was rooted in the spoken word tradition. I was someone who was very interested in kind of arts education, especially for young people. So there would be these times where I'd read the poems, I'd read the nature poems, and I would say, okay, where is the narrative of human struggle and triumph, in this work? And, she was with that. But she would also say sometimes, let's just linger with the grass in this poem. Maybe this poet is really interested in sheep. And that was this radical opening for me. I was like, man, all right, I had to go home. And Jesse knows, but I was really sitting with that. I was like, man, gotta study up on these sheep, man. It just seems like they were really into it and thinking about the distinction between day and night and all these kind of inventions that may seem natural or intuitive to us now, but come from the period. And, Gwendolyn Brooks, too, who inspired the epigraph. She has a poem in here And I promise I'll go back to Anne Spencer in a second. But Gwendolyn Brooks, she was translating Virgil from the Latin when she was 15 years old. Her father, David Brooks, was a janitor who trained as a surgeon at Fisk, drops out of Fisk to take care of his family, works at McKinley Music Factory. I don't know the means by which the brother procured this particular object, but he came home from work one day with a desk and said, "This is now your desk, Gwendolyn." And this became her writing desk for her entire childhood. And she wrote plays for kids twice her age at 5 years old. She's writing church plays for the 12-year-olds at their church. Her mother takes some of her poems when she's a teenage girl, runs up to Langston Hughes, says, to paraphrase, "My daughter's a genius. Gotta read these poems." And Langston Hughes reads the poems. Does the same thing to James Weldon Johnson, sends him the poem. She's like, "These are great. Read these other poets. Strengthen yourself. Study this tradition." I love that. And part of what I'm trying to do in all my work, in The People Can Fly, but also this book, is say, golly, where would we be if we could find ways to memorialize people like David and Keziah Brooks and the vision they had for their children and for their world? Anything they ever had, they gave away. So Gwendolyn Brooks is the first Black poet to win a Pulitzer. And what she chooses to do with that fame, that notoriety, is put on open mics for kids in Chicago. Into the 2000s, like into the 21st century. She's in the audience for the Gwendolyn Brooks Open Mic Award, watching 15-year-olds do spoken word poems. That's the model of literary citizenship that drew me to being a professor. My first job after Foot Locker was at a hedge fund. I thought I was going a very different direction. but then the books, they got me, So this is for Anne. Lynchburg, Virginia, comes from the section of the Georgics dedicated to the beginnings of agriculture, lines 118 through 159, with a line from Wendy Walters. Before Jupiter's time, no farmers worked the land, or so we are told, though we must imagine scores of poets honing songs in sugar fields. Underground, held within the belly of ships, prophets of an age before our inner worlds might manifest on paper, and the sacred bard behind the words survive. Hence, the standard becomes subterfuge, concealment. A century and a half passes between Hammond's first lines in print and Anne Spencer's questing, her timeless directive, "Let me learn now where beauty is," and preserve it by whatever means available, inventing new ones even, if the methods at hand are insufficient or require we lose our sense of what it means to amplify the life, to see the boy in chains and know there is an endlessness in him the present obscures. At their home in Lynchburg, Edward Spencer builds for his beloved an enclosed garden, half an acre, where the titans of their day meet and map another vision of this world within the veil. James Weldon Johnson, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois all drink and dance, conjuring the future phrase by phrase. And Anne, the chambers of her mind filled with flowers, nasturtium and hollyhock, germander, bergamot, turtlehead, butterfly weed, book after book bursting with petals and stems, she shares with the children, levitating through the library at Dunbar High School, where she guards meticulously the rolling record of our travails in overcoming. There is a story they are weaving, across generations running parallel to one another. They share a living dream in that building, on 12th and Polk Street, behind the brick. Yes, those words they etch onto notebooks in the illuminated air are incantations, summoning unthinkable color from stone. All right, thank y'all. Maybe one or two more, and then we could jump in to a Q&A. And then maybe I'll read one more. Who can say? I've been talking about Princeton so much. I gotta read this New Jersey poem. Plainfield, New Jersey. It's another Virgil poem. But also Bill Evans is in here and Lucille Clifton is in here. And I feel like whenever I get in public, I gotta talk about Lucille Clifton, who had 6 children by the time her first book came out, right? I think they were 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 years old. Which some people say is why the poems are so short. She had to, in between one going to bed and one waking up, she had to compose, and listen out for the muse. But she has this beautiful line, the future is possible, in her poem Spring Song. And I think about that a lot. So right now I'm trying to write a book about the color green, because it's always on my mind. So this is Plainfield, New Jersey, spring plowing, lines 43 through 70. But if the earth has not been fertile, it's enough to lift it into song. I almost hear Virgil saying in the background of my mind's moonlit vestibule, where the animals gather to sift their dreams, weigh prophecy. There was more than one messenger who said we must believe in spring. Bill Evans, Lucille Clifton, who claimed the future is possible, meant it, filled pages with flowers to light our way home. In spring, we reap color, vibrance in every mode. Lawns and leaves, the trunks of trees, our clothes, birds racing forth out of winter's silver ambiance into unabashed, prismatic splendor. The greenness gathered over months in the planet's subconscious, that gallant greenness of newly discovered love, an imagination at work, like a tide of green cascading up the cliffside, the green tendrils and shoots and roots expanding their shadowed network. Rhizomatic schemata, they whisper in the graduate seminar, reading Deleuze and Guattari, that other philosopher of spring, who sang of three ecologies, the land, the mind, and the people, the way the green in me depends upon the green of the multitude for its strength and proper form, consciousness in ever-expanding grove, leaf, mud, and stone, this slick green infinity we hold and keep, if only we learn to adore the practice of its cultivation, the warmth of our sun overhead, a kind of guiding ethos, the light you give that annihilates or ushers into life, the way a curse is cast by the same mechanism as a name, or a call to come back home, where the trees of the field are an ensemble swaying, the melody in the air ages older than any human sound, though you know it by heart. All right. Let's do two more. Yeah. I'll read this poem about Prince. Any Prince fans? Yeah. How could there not be? Wherever we go, there are many of us. This is Minneapolis, Minnesota, for Prince. Arrangements of amethyst, clouds of lavender mist emanate from the incandescent sage on stage as he narrates the elsewhere he hails from at a pace best described as peripatetic. Kinesthetic genius unfolding behind a white guitar, microphone stand, whatever metal medium the bard selects to let this latest epic levitate through. At the Super Bowl, he collaborates with the rainstorm. Alongside MJ, he shreds, goes shirtless, growls like a jaguar, crashes a lamppost. Yes, in blurred footage, he is a violet silhouette. Violins pirouette in the background while the man paints landscapes of fathomless desire. Though his art, in a way, is the swing between release and restraint, that line in the air where the human body breaks into orchard at the touch of another. The thought of it even, the sound that brings the feeling home to live with you and transform what you once held true into something more lovely and strange. I think I'll close with this poem about typewriters. I'll combine two poems. A poem about typewriters and a poem about a child prodigy. This is Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where the typewriter was invented. I just say a little bit about, this is perfect. I just started reading all these Paris Review interviews about typewriters and writers' relationships to their typewriters, and I just found all this stuff I loved. So that was the inspiration for this poem. I also found this beautiful interview with Robert Frost, where characteristically perhaps, he talks about poems as athletic feats. And he talks about how every time he writes a poem, he's trying to score, and he wishes. It's kind of interesting. He said, "I wish reviewers would write about that more." And I just love that aggression. He's like, "You're serious, dude." All right, this is Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for Christopher Latham Scholes. An error carries its pinch of pain, but is not permanent with a typewriter. It gestures toward a way of life. Consider that classic opening of those interviews with poets you love. What do you write with or on? And the history of typewriters embedded in it. John Ashbery's typewriter came to him as a kind of fix. While writing a poem with lines so long, he finds himself forgetting the ends of them just before landing. He compared the machine's speed to his pace with a pen, The long dance of mind and hand made the switch for life. A.R. Ammons's was an Underwood manual that he bought in Berkeley in the 1950s, kept for the control it allowed him over the spaces and shapes he called to the page like an ellipsis of birds in earshot. Praise the instrument, extension, apprentice, vessel through which the ink and music roil to make this new third thing that enchants us, holds the law within its dimensions, moves soldiers over continents, houses vows which lived once only in the heart and air, is cognition made real, to be torn, kept, cherished as it moves from paper to tessellations of dust, back to the green and black earth, which is the body of the Lord. All right, last one. This is for Katherine Johnson, the NASA scientist. Anybody know Katherine? All right, cool. And then we'll talk a little bit more maybe about rocket ships. Working with my students, it's made me just much more industrious, because I go around in a circle, we talk about major, hometown, the whole thing. And sometimes we talk about, why you're here, what brought you to the Institute, as it's sometimes called, right? And I'll never forget one of my students said, oh yeah, I just was really excited about the premise of building rocket ships. I was like, oh, that's amazing. What are you doing next year? He's like, I'm going to build rocket ships. that's phenomenal. So, I'm always captivated by that scope and scale. And whenever I get something resembling writer's block, I'm like, nah, the kids are out here building rocket ships. I got to go to my desk and knock this out. So this is White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, for Katherine Johnson. The math in the girl's mind scales walls, courses across the ceiling of her childhood home in White Sulphur Springs, dances along the surfaces as she walks from end to end, giving language to the symbols. It was Levi Strauss who said, a certain genius for music and math lingers within some of us from birth, that one hears the sounds and sees the signs in ways defying description, then elaborates that vision, or else allows it to lie dormant, fading to background like a kind of fog or diegetic instrumental, humming in the atmosphere of a single life. But Katherine's parents saw the gift for what it was, portal to another plane, a key to the invisible architecture of oak trees and moonlight, goldfinches hunting just beyond the window. Thus, they traveled from town to town in search of teachers for the child visionary in their midst. College at 15, then NASA, then ships soaring above our heads into endless ultraviolet before returning to us, magnetized by the infinitude in her eyes. Okay, now we're on time. I usually bring a device with me that records such things.
7:45.
Nice, clean. Thank you so much. I feel like that was nice 30, 40 minutes. Okay, does anyone have questions? If not, I have other shorter poems, but also I'm just glad to talk about process, about what else? Process, teaching, some of the themes in the book. Have a good one.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
I'm sad that lots of contemporary poets are losing a sense of musicality in their poetry, and that seems to be central in the way you write.
Oh,
so can you speak about your music and how that works inside your poems?
Oh, thank you so much. I was worried that was going to take another turn for a second, and this embodies, this larger problem. Yeah, no, gosh, the music is the highest aspiration for me. If a very talented drummer came in here right now, it'd be very difficult to focus on what I'm saying. And I love that, right? One of my favorite writers on earth is named Sylvia Wynter. And she often says that her aspiration is to sound in prose the way Aretha Franklin sounded when she sang. And as someone who was trained, again, especially as a poet, my training is from preachers, and the preacher is always in this kind of beautiful, almost dialectical tension with the organist. And we're sort of dancing between the lyric stylings of the preacher and the organist who can also move the group. The Holy Spirit in my tradition doesn't fall until you play music. So music's very important for me. I write to music sometimes. Milt Jackson, or Coltrane or Evans. Coltrane's the first sound my son heard beside me and his mother's voice when he came to Earth. They let me just fill the hospital room with it. Yeah, I don't know what else I would be doing if I couldn't hear that beat behind me when I read it. I mean, I guess people could be very polite, you know, or enjoy the language choices, you know, but when I get up and read, I want it to feel like a conversation and maintain the musicality of conversation. When you're really in it with somebody, it does feel like you're improvising or like you're in an ensemble. So thank you for that. And yeah, all the poets I love hold music in high esteem. You know, I think about Terrence Hayes, B.H. Fairchild, Stephen Dunn, Gwendolyn Brooks, Lucille Clifton, Thylius Moss, you know, the people I was pulling off those shelves in the Firestone. And I just remember thinking, what are they doing to the voice in my head? You know, they were just stretching it and just introducing these kind of polyrhythms that I thought were just so fascinating. One last thing, I heard a talk in Princeton recently where someone talked about the enslaved having a polyrhythmic cosmology, right? So it wasn't just that music was central to their social practice, but the cultivation of agriculture was polyrhythmic, right? It was that music was just one instantiation of a polyrhythmic universe. So when I turn to the poems, I think that's the thing I'm listening out for. I'm trying to be quiet so the muse can bring me the music. Yeah, thank you. Here and then back.
I was thinking when you were reading of Melvin Tolson,
Yeah.
and wondering
honor.
if there was, I mean, the
Golly.
eloquence and the elegance that he combines with a kind of quotidian fierceness,
Yeah.
which I would say not exactly what you were reading tonight in the poems tonight, as much as like Song of Micah.
Yeah.
You know, where there's that. Anyway, I was just wondering if he was an influence.
Always, goodness. Quotidian fierceness. I'm going to borrow that. If that's okay. let's correspond. That's got to get into the back of a book or on the Penguin website or something. Yeah, I mean, the Book of Micah is another one of these funny things, right? Where, wow, it was 2020, and that was initially intended to be a script. And I'll get to Tolson in a second. It was intended to be a script because I was just thinking, I don't know if these poems are going to make me enough money. And my son was on the way. You know, my wife was pregnant. And I was like, all right, I'm going to write a script. And about 3 months in, I realized I had no idea how to do that. So I thought, all right, maybe I'll reverse engineer it. And I'll try to write a novella, maybe prose poetry. And I had this idea of Micah, who first appears in Ode, my second collection. And I thought, well, what would it look like to let the character from that long prose sequence live another life and be surrounded by figures who construct the story of the before and after of his resurrection. And I think, yeah, there was something about quotidian fierceness in this imagined version of Brooklyn that I wanted to capture. And like Tolson, Tolson quite famously is a debater, right? And also a brilliant page poet. You know, The Sea Turtle and the Shark is one of my kind of favorite poems. I wrote about it in my first book, Being Property Once Myself. And Tolson was also, you know, he was in this book called The Lincoln University Poets. Do you know this anthology? It's a beautiful anthology. Jesse and I are actually working on an anthology that takes segments from it. But all to say, he was someone who was very attentive to the dance between the page and stage. And he was someone who really believed in the training up of students. And I did not think it robbery to be published alongside a bunch of college students, which I always thought was kind of cool and really important. I mean, he's in there with Warren Cuny, Bruce M. Wright. Anyone in here know Bruce M. Wright? His brother is fascinating. So he got into Princeton in 1935, got to campus the first day, and they said, we didn't realize you were black when we let you in, so now you have to leave. So he left, went to Lincoln University, where he meets up with Langston Hughes. Langston edits his first book, From the Shaken Tower, and they work together on this anthology. He eventually is elected to the New York State Supreme Court, becomes the lawyer for Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday, and Malcolm X. And he becomes this incredible figure. But if you read his legal scholarship, it's filled with poetry. It's T.S. Eliot, Spinoza, Nietzsche. And he's just someone who really believed in, you know, I'm writing about him now, what I call the world-making force of the word. And I think Tolson did too. So whether you speak it, whether you write it, believe that in poetry, as in the law, words shape reality. You know, borders are shifted, families are created or broken apart, people are placed in chains or go free, based in part on what we say, how convincing it is, how moving it is to a listener, whether that's a jury of our peers, opposing counsel, or a person in a quiet room reading a book. Tolson was one of the first people to teach me that, I think. So I'm always chasing him in some way. Both, I would say, from afar, but hopefully when I'm quiet and really reading the poems, hopefully I can hear him whisper, you know, and get some of that wisdom. Yeah. Your hands back, Patrick, and then here.
Joshua, I would like to, I guess question is linked to both of your answers, that notions of polyrhythm,
Yeah.
right, and stretching the imagination.
Yeah.
So you went to school at Princeton, extremely competitive, 12 hours in the library,
Yeah.
so MIT, and you talk about how the students were building rocket ship.
Yeah.
In a sense, they force you, right, to go beyond that so-called writer's block because there's a kind of competition. Let's reverse that. How has your creative mind, the exposure to creative writing, stretched their own imagination beyond sort of the engineering? And do you see a kind of stretching of the imagination in which the creative writing have helped their engineering mind?
Oh, brother, what a beautiful question. I sure hope so. I mean, one of the, but no, I mean, there's a little bit of evidence, maybe. I mean, one of the great joys in my career, about a year or so ago. I love these students so much. So it turns out that after each of my poetry classes, some of the students were sneaking off to write poetry together on their own. And every time they would add each other to this big group chat. So after my first 3 years at MIT, there was this huge group of poets calling themselves the People's Poetry, inspired by Jim Jordan. They were meeting up to write these poems. And about a year ago, they handed me a collection of poetry that was just all theirs, that they'd written and edited together. And some of where I've seen, I think the answer to your question manifest is in their final projects. So I don't think I anticipated kind of the rise of large language models or anything with this, but it just kind of hit me. I don't think the final papers are totally capturing all of what we've maybe learned or been pursuing together. So I just started having them build something, right? I would have them build an adaptation. So I would say based on a novel, a play we've read, a book of poetry we've read, design something, create something. And what they've created has been astonishing, right? One of my students created a public program where she goes into hospices and she creates works of art from the memories of the elders there, right? Another student created an original musical instrument where you have to go outside to play it, and the neural net algorithm pitches the sound of your voice to the sound of the natural world. So for his final, he went in front of the Charles River and it made his voice sound like water. You know, he recorded it and sent me a link. Digital collages, you know, beautiful suites of sonnets, working models of the planet. I mean, all these really interesting kind of experiments. And I think part of what they've taught me is that the desire to silo these things, right, like engineering and poetry, is a mistake, right? They're both poesis, right? They're both making. And when you start talking about, you know, a poem, yes, I know I miss teaching. You know, I'm gonna do like board work with these shelves. You know, when you think about a poem as a building, right? It's like, okay, so you have a kitchen, right? So there's the heat maybe in the kitchen, and have the living room for company. Maybe people are moving in a different way in those stanzas. Because, you know, stanza is the Italian for room, right? So we're building rooms for each other, and we're also making room for one another in the space. So what do you want to build in the world? You want it to make room for people the way good poems do. And it is my sense from talking to them after they graduate that some of that does stick. And that it maybe is harder to go back into this other thing that I've seen them relentlessly trend into elsewhere. You know, MIT is I want to be careful on camera, it's fine. It's a very class diverse place. And the stakes of some of the questions my students ask me about what they're going to do about graduation is very serious. You know, they might say, I'm from rural Idaho. Like, this is my family's chance to not live in poverty as me being here. But I'm being told I have to contribute to the war machine for that to be feasible, right? Or not even always that. Sometimes I'm gonna have to sit in place and code for 10 hours at a time, and I don't love that. I'm really good at it, maybe one of the best in the world at it, at least based on the check they're offering me. But I really love music. I love dance, right? I love ballet, opera, stage play. Like all these things really speak to me. And the thing I try to tell them is, I mean, look, if you love it that much, it'll haunt you, right? So think about the money. There's no way it can't be a consideration. But you're trying to live a full life, you know? So figure out how you can integrate trying to keep a roof over your head, keep yourself and your loved ones fed. But also you gotta feed the soul, you know? So do that dance the way we all have to. You know, that's part of what it means to live an abundant life. Yeah, other hand. Oh yeah, right here.
My question kind of comes at the end of where you just left off. boil it down, I'm curious about what are the protocols of like apprehension. This was language that you used.
Yeah.
But I heard apprehension
Yeah.
in the way that you talked about it having its own rewards. And this beautiful, like celestial sort of, gathering of poets that you put together.
Yeah.
I'm hearing like A.R. Hammond, who you mentioned, his idea of hesitancy having its own rewards.
Yeah.
The question about apprehension is coming from Wallace Stevens and thinking about him and his idea of like a harmonious skeptic, right? And how that symmetry is carried in the beautiful things you open with about the error being, as to paraphrase or to put it in my own words, as magisterial as the aim, right? I'm wondering, with the book having this sort of gesture toward the collective, the we, one, what are your protocols of apprehension, right? Like how do you come into the poem? How does the poem come into you?
Yeah.
But also, what are the protocols of apprehension that you want to impart with this book poetry?
Golly, beautiful question. So in that poem, I'm thinking about my boy, who's 5 years old, 3'10", big. And so part of what I'm always trying to tell him, is that like, that's a responsibility when you're that tall, and people map things onto you. And never be afraid, but do your best to sort of communicate your position and be strong in who you are. What I'm wrestling with in that poem, as in elsewhere, and in the craft too, is it's not always clear how much fear really rescues us from, right? So when you ask me about my own apprehension, I'm kind of trying to wait in stillness, especially with this book. I mean, I got a poem about the move bombing in here. I mean, a lot of the kind of gestures in this book really are about me trying to release the forms of apprehension that at least I know I felt consciously were helping make certain parts of my life possible, right? I was like, if I don't say this exactly this way, they might let me keep working here. And that's no way to live. There's no way to live. And so part of what I've really been trying to do in the writing is let all of those voices in, right? Because I think those forms of apprehension, hesitance are crucial, especially when we're talking about real people, real stories. But when you have real relationships, somebody will just tell you to change their name in a poem or keep them out of it, right? So if my mom's about to be in a poem, call my mom up. Mom, you about to be in this sonnet. What's up? She's like, yeah, it's cool. Or she'll be like, boy, take that out, right? And then we can wrestle with it. And that took the 10 years, right? From when I was a graduate student and everything's going, I'm a writer, you knew what you signed up for. That doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make logical sense. Why are you telling people that, right? You knew what you signed up for. I was a baby, you know I was gonna write all this stuff, right? And so I've been trying to do that dance between kind of apprehension and sustained attention, right? To say, actually, if I'm trying to do this sacred thing, I have to let myself linger in the space, as Christopher Caldwell would say, between illusion and reality, and get more comfortable there. Though I love the empirical, I love charts and graphs. It's not totally clear to me that at least not the poets I cherish and adore, that doesn't really seem to be their bag. Not really. Not if you read their interviews and hear them talk. It don't sound like that. Right? So, I don't know where this came from. Merwin's whole thing that I love to quote, the electric. He says it's when a sequence of words begins to pick up an electrical charge. Right? He didn't say when I feel it, when the lightning hits me, shoots from my fingertips. No, it's like the words are doing a thing that I'm a witness to. Right? And sometimes I even get to jump in there and choreograph a little bit, and then maybe it works, maybe it plays. So sometimes I'm apprehensive about that because it's still very scary. I've been writing poetry since I was 4. I still don't really get what's happening when I do it, but it brings me incredible joy, and I'll do it for the rest of my life, for as long as I can. It's a gift that keeps going. Yeah, please. Okay.
So I'm a writing student, but I'm very tempted right now to just go off and after college become like a carpenter or something.
Ooh.
And
Okay.
I'm thinking about what you were just saying.
Sure.
Last night I watched Viola Davis give her acceptance speech. It's like an old video where she was like talking about how someone asked her what roles she wants to play.
Yeah.
And she said, the people, all those people in graveyards who were almost great, right? But didn't quite get there. They didn't. Their name isn't known. she thinks that art is so valuable because it's the only career where you are completely dedicated to commemorating those people, right? You were talking about poetry as a memory of technology.
Yeah.
Or a technology memory.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, how do you, I mean, when there's this really compelling urgency in the present, so to take care of yourself and your people and make a living, and you were sort of getting to this.
Yeah.
How do you avoid alienation, right? When you're spending so much time thinking about the past and dedicating yourself to things that have already passed. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I think my parents really messed me up. And here's what I mean by this. I mean, the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was Malcolm X. Spike Lee's Malcolm X. Right? Now, if you do some quick math, I'm 5 years old. Now, this movie comes out. And then we get out of the theater, and I'm like, Mom, I need to learn more about Denzel's character. And I mean, I imagine I can go into the archive and see if this is the case. She could have got me maybe a children's book about, Malcolm X. She got me an autobiography, right? So I'm like a 5-year-old boy with this book, it's 544-page book. And I read Webster's because my mom would never tell me what words meant when I didn't know it. Look it up, young man. I'm like, why don't you just help me? Right? And that became my moral education, right? So your question about what is the relationship between the past and the present, I think for me, it's always kind of blurred without friction, right? Because my parents basically were giving me Malcolm as an exemplar, right? This kind of point of triangulation between what is and what ought to be. And that helped make me brave, I think, as a kid to actually, and I have colleagues who write about this. I mean, there's this idea that in moments of performance, you almost thought you were Malcolm X. We would get up there on stage and recite these speeches. We would recite "We Real Cool." And there was the sense that you were taking on something metaphysical that kind of got a hold on you. And you were a vessel for something ancient that was happening. Hortense Spillers actually says this in her dissertation. She talks about the enslaved preacher as this point of intersection between the West African griot and the Shakespearean English of the King James Bible, and that these two traditions pass through the preacher's body, right, and come out to us as kind of sermonic exclamation. And I think I was raised in something like that space. So how I try to do the dance is, I say we can't really move forward in the ways we want without a deep engagement with history. I wouldn't even know how to understand myself, outside of a relationship to a father who grew up under Jim Crow, integrated his high school. Mother grew up in a tenement, but was playing the viola at Carnegie Hall. I mean, New York is such a weird place, right? In the 60s, like that, both of those things are happening at the same time, gets into an honors college, right, in CUNY, and becomes an accountant. And that means it was a wild number, something like $3,000, buy our house, right, in the 90s with my dad's VA mortgage, this unique kind of combination that allowed her to just send me off to school, right? That's only possible because all of these historical forces, public policy at the time that made that possible, a certain economic moment. And I think if you don't have those things, you can get really swept up in fantasies about how you got where you got. Right? You can say, "Oh, I'm just so smart. I'm so charismatic and captivating." Clearly, right? That's what made me, right? That's what you'll start to believe. And part of what I really appreciate about my students is a lot of them really do have that deep sense. Sometimes in a way that I worry can be crushing. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're a person. We get to get some delight in this life. We have to try. So I see that you feel the collective. You feel that we got to lift everybody up, but we're no good to the people we love if we're utterly destroyed, right, by the pursuit of whatever, right? Sometimes it's greatness. Sometimes it's a job. Sometimes it's an academic position. Don't I know it? So people love me. To answer your question, I think that's how I keep from the alienation. I think people love me and really take care of me. My wife is not an academic. She's a doula and a lab manager. And she taught me how to relax. First time I ever saw her relax, I was scared. I thought something had happened to her. Outside in the backyard, she was laying down, looking at the sky. I was terrified. "Honey, are you okay?" She's like, "Babe, what's wrong with you?" I said, "What happened to you? What's going on?" She said, "Babe, I'm relaxing." I realized I've never seen a person relax in my whole life. I've never seen it. And she's initiated me into that tradition. So there are times, Jesse, you call, man, I'm chilling, man. I'm in the back of the house, I'm sitting under the tree, Mr. Tree. That's what we call the tree in the front. I'm with Mr. Tree. I'm just, looking at these turkeys walk around or whatever. I'm on the South Shore. It's beautiful. And that's what keeps me from alienation. It's just like the love of people who tell me, oh, it's all right. Let's just rest today. And the work will be there tomorrow. Yeah, maybe 2 more, and then here and there.
Oh, sure. Mike, more of just a thank you. It's really interesting listening to you speak, and I like how you talk about the integration and someone who's kind of and I assume will always be a novice in this realm of literature. There's just so much great stuff out there, and very eloquent. I really like how you were able to integrate into your poetries the overwhelming humanitarian, just this great big picture stuff with also Prince and Star Trek and goldfinches. And I love integrating your personality, and I got senses of you and this greater themes in general. And I know how difficult that can be to share with others, and especially the really deeply personal things. So I just appreciate and thank you for the time you spent today. So,
thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it. A lot of people made room for me to do it. I got a text from my 10th grade English teacher today, Khalik Sims, who's the head of a school called Academy for Girls right now in Baltimore. And she's been reading the books. And she just sent me this beautiful text message. And she's one of the people who helped make it possible, I think, for me to get up and feel like I can just talk. And maybe it's tied to that other thing, too, about when I leave here, and even here, there are people here who love me, like in real life, like apart from what I do. And I think as long as we have that, we can be magnificently courageous in life and in the work. So thank you for seeing that. I try to keep parts of myself vibrant and alive in it.
Sorry, just a personal thing.
Yeah.
Charts and graphs relax me. So when people see
Nice.
me relaxing,
Okay.
they panic because they're like, oh my God, what's financially, or what's wrong? He's got graphs up. And I'm like, this is how I relax.
No,
So,
I love charts and graphs. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
Like, I'm an empirically minded guy, but then it was just the books. The sonnets got me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just kept reading them. And I was all right. Maybe later I'll go back. Please.
I don't have the words just because I was just being so present with your reading and your responses. But I feel like you've more or less said this, but I feel like when you talk about other poets, you're building this big constellation between you and them over time.
Yeah.
And I was someone who came up saying you in the slam poem videos.
Oh, wow.
I can't think of specific poems because my brain is just so present. And then that's still you then, and that's still you now. And I guess like without, I can't think of the right word, but like whatever like anecdotal or personal like line you want to make between like the person in those videos and the poet now.
Sure.
And then like I guess Sandra Cisneros in her short story 11, the image I had in my mind, like the quickest way to say it is, in 11 she talks about being 10 and 9 and 8 and 7. So like whatever you want to do with all of that.
Yeah. Gosh, thank you for that. And thank you for watching the videos. That helps me like.
And your slam book is like so readable. I read like 30 pages next door. Like,
everybody! Thank you
pick it
so
up.
much.
And it's coming up from the 90s. It's like so great to see like that legacy embodied in that text.
Thank you. That means a lot. Gosh, sorry, you just made me think about this high school teacher in San Francisco who said he was teaching that book as a textbook, which was astonishing to me. I was like, how are you doing that? That's remarkable. It's just 15-year-olds, and I'll just reading about Miguel Algarín and the Nuyorican poets who changed my life. Josh at 7, 8, 9, 10 is always on my mind. I think sometimes about how he would feel seeing me now. And it's hard being a child. June Jordan described it as a kind of universal position because everyone in the world either who's alive either is a child or has been one, right? And that the child represents a kind of vulnerability that a lot of us want to get rid of on our way to adulthood, to shore ourselves up with armor or pieces of paper. And, you're a witness to the world without weapons in a certain way sometimes when you're a kid. And I started being filmed reading poetry when I was 17. So we're 20 years in, from that first YouTube video at Washington Irving High School. I have on a Mark Echo button-up. It's white and lavender. All white Jordan retro ones. And I crushed that poem. It was so much fun. It was one of the first 2 poems I ever wrote. You know how it is because you're in that world. So you're running it in the mirror. You're making breakfast, you know, reciting this poem. You ask one of your friends to run it with you, face to face. You say the poem to each other. And I'm really proud of him. You know, I know how hard it was to feel like a life in art was possible because I'd never seen anybody make one. I didn't grow up around professors. My aunt was a playwright, Aunt Gloria, may she rest. She was also the first person speaking of charts and graphs. She was like, boy, one day you're going to be a millionaire. I was like, based on what? What are you talking about? But I realized it wasn't really about like, the dollar amount. It was just open your mind up. Like anything's possible. That was her shorthand, I think. So yeah, I think about him all the time. I think about the teachers who loved him. How diverse in many ways that constellation was. Like my second grade teacher, Miss Quinn, who used to keep my report cards in her purse. I ran into my dad in front of Carvel. Anyone know Carvel, the ice cream chain? I miss Carvel. So they met in front of Carvel, and she was just talking about, this is like 10 years after I was in her second grade class. And the teachers who recommended me for summer programs, and the many who in the years since, people like Imani Perry, right, at Harvard, who, I mean, if you have grad students, you write for them kind of forever. Right? She's written letters for me saying, hey, Josh is cool, you know, for a very long time. And I think that sort of commitment is something I try to model every day. As a teacher, as an educator, as a mentor, I have graduate students everywhere. I might have one in another country, depending on my answer to his email, which is going to be yes, I think, you know. So surprised if that person's in here, we'll talk tomorrow. And that's in part because of younger Josh, you know, and the people who said, keep going, keep going. Stan Lathan, who said, yo, you should come to the White House. My sister, who said, yes, I'll be your manager after I performed at the White House, because I was like, well, what do I do now? Can people pay me in things other than plates of biscuits? And all that support, you know, it got me through school and it got me here today. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate it.